I just had a fascinating conversation on the Strength Running podcast that I really wanted to film a video about on ranking injury prevention strategies from most effective to least effective. And what I want to do in this video is talk more about the most effective strategies for keeping you healthy, what's actually going to move the needle, and what's kind of a waste of time. What is not really going to do much for you. Maybe it's marketed as a cure-all, but actually isn't going to be effective at preventing your next big injury. So let's start with what I think is the number one most important thing. It doesn't matter how much recovery you do. It doesn't matter if you get everything else right. If you don't get this right, you're probably going to get hurt. And that strategy is proper training. It means doing mileage levels that are appropriate for you. It means being consistent with mileage levels. It means being consistent with workouts, doing workouts that are appropriate for you, appropriate for your goals, and also appropriate for where you are in the training cycle. Obviously, what you do the week of the marathon or a 5K is going to be very different than what you did 12 weeks before and 10 weeks before that. So we need our training to be periodized in a proper way. And if we can get our training right, running appropriate paces, really being process-oriented and making sure that we're implementing really sound progressions of both volume and intensity, then I'm very confident a lot of runners are going to avoid some of their big injuries. And you maybe would have gotten a really bad injury, and with proper training, it ends up being just a minor niggle that took a couple days of time off to heal. Or maybe that little niggle just doesn't happen at all. And so we can use proper training to reduce our risk of injury. Okay, once we get our training right, there are three other things that I think occupy this really top tier of injury prevention strategies. Now, of course, we've got to get our training right, but once we get our training right, once we know we're doing the right thing, maybe we're using a good plan, maybe we've hired a coach, maybe we've just talked to some of the accomplished runners that you know. Once we get that right, the next three things we should really get right are: number one, our sleep; number two, our fueling and total calorie load; and the third thing is strength training. Now, let's talk about each one, because sleep is really important. The studies have actually shown the amount of sleep you get has a direct correlation with your injury risk. There was a really interesting study done on college basketball players and showed that if they got 6 hours of sleep for a week, their injury rate increased dramatically compared to the control group that got a more normal amount of sleep of about 8 hours. So this is really clear that sleep has a profound effect on our ability to stay healthy, because that's when we recover. What's the point of doing the workout if you're not going to recover and sleep afterwards? So let's try to get as much sleep as we can, especially when we're training hard. Let's try to sleep in a cool room. Let's make it really dark. Maybe we're going to use some blackout curtains, a sound machine. Really focus on your sleep hygiene. Now, when it comes to fueling and calories, I'm not a dietitian, nor do I play one on the internet. So I'm not going to talk about the intricacies of diet or how you're eating, your nutrition. I will say that being in a calorie deficit has a measurable impact on your ability to recover. And this isn't necessarily even on a daily basis. This is even within a day. So in other words, if you have just a couple hour period where you have low energy availability and your calories aren't up where they need to be, you're going to increase your injury risk, because you're not going to be able to recover properly from the run, the workout that you just did. So I think this is a really interesting look into how, if you're training hard, you need to create the environment in which your body has the fuel to perform and the fuel to recover. I could not make these videos without your support. So first, let me say thank you. And this video is brought to you by our very own performance training journal. I have always been in love with hard copy training journals for a few really good reasons. Number one, when I was a new runner and I started keeping an actual training journal like this, I learned so much more about the sport and myself just by that practice. It really forces you to reflect on your training, to think more deeply about what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And if you are constantly reflecting on your training, praising yourself for what's going right, planning for the future, and then looking back on what has previously worked for you, you are gonna really know yourself as a runner, and you're gonna start to make wiser decisions about your training. I also created this training journal because I want you to focus on the training metrics that actually matter. The training metrics that help you improve, get better, and progress with your running. We don't have to focus on everything. We just need to focus on what matters. I also took a lot of inspiration from professional runners that I've talked to on the Strength Running podcast. They're adamant by completing a training journal and reflecting on what works for you and actually giving yourself some praise within your journal. You're essentially completing a gratitude journal. You are building up your confidence in your own abilities over time. And when you look back on that journal before a big goal race, you are going to be reading in your own words why you're capable, why you can do this. And I can think of nothing more confidence building than an act like that. So I hope you check out the new performance training journal. It is now available on Amazon. It debuted as the #4 new release in the running category, and I could not be more proud of it. So thank you again for subscribing to the Strength Running YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy the Performance Training Journal. All right, our final strategy that occupies this top tier is strength training. Now, I think strength training is so important. I don't really consider it separate from our running. It's just part of the training that we need to do as runners to reach our potential. And especially if you're a master's runner, if you've never tried strength training, pretty much everyone who tries it and stays consistent with it recognizes that it's a game changer. They feel amazing. And I just challenge you to get consistent with it, get on a good program that is periodized, that really has you doing running specific work. And I think you're gonna like the way that you feel. After all, we runners need that extra armor that strength training gives us. A little bit of stronger muscles, tougher connective tissues and joints so that we can withstand the impact and the stresses of running. So I'm a big fan of strength training. I've come full circle from where I used to be at the beginning of my running career, where I didn't think runners needed to do strength training at all. And now I am fully on board because the science is undeniable, as well as just looking at the training habits of the best runners in the world. They're all doing some form of strength training, and we should too. So that's the important stuff. Now I want to talk about some things that can be helpful, things that do move the needle, but you should really focus first on those fundamentals. Let's get those things right, and then we can worry about this tier of injury prevention strategies that I think is great, I think can be helpful when layered on top of those fundamentals. So number one is massage. Massage is just some type of physical manipulation of your muscles and your tissues. You can do this by using a foam roller, using one of those scraping tools, going to get a professional formal massage, having your partner give you a little bit of a massage wherever you think you need it. And this brings blood flow to the area that you're massaging, and blood flow brings a lot of things that help us heal and recover. Now, especially if you're dealing with anything in an area of the body that just doesn't really get much blood flow, you know, the Achilles comes to mind, for example, it's really even more helpful to undergo some massage and bring some extra blood flow to those areas. So if you haven't done any massage, this can be really, really helpful. It's just going to also make you feel better. And I think with a sport as difficult as running, we need to do things that make us feel good on a day-to-day basis, because otherwise we're just going to be feeling the effects of training. We're going to feel heavy, we're going to feel fatigued, and it's just not a good way to feel very motivated to keep training. So a really simple self-massage practice can be super helpful for you. Another strategy in this middle category of strategies is compression. I've been using compression now for over 10 years, especially for the lower legs. I find it very, very helpful. I've recently partnered with 2XU to sponsor the podcast and some of our other videos. And I'm just a really big fan of how you feel after compression. There's some really good research on how graded compression helps additional blood flow to those areas. And that's a big component to a lot of these strategies, especially some of the strategies in this middle category is just bringing blood flow to these affected areas. And that's just going to help the healing process, the recovery process, which is going to reduce your injury risk. Now, also in this middle category are things like supplements and things like contrast therapy. So doing a sauna and then an ice bath and then going back and forth between the two for a little bit, for a while. I'm partial to the 15 minutes in the sauna and then 2 minutes in the ice bath. The sauna makes the ice bath possible. And so if you struggle with that ice bath, the sauna makes it a lot easier. And so these things, again, from the contrast therapy definitely brings a lot of enhanced blood flow to your muscles, and that's going to enhance the recovery process and reduce your injury risk. And then, when it comes to supplements, I think are this like weird category a lot of people think are a scam. I used to think all supplements were a scam. And, I finally partnered with a supplement company that I trust. That's Previnex. They use clinically studied ingredients. They just seem like a company that's trying to do the right thing in an industry that's the Wild West. Supplements are like the cherry on top of your diet. They should not be the foundation, but if you're training really hard, I think supplementing with some extra protein, with creatine, with a basic multivitamin. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could do things like, specific joint or immune support or something like a greens mix to help you get in some extra veggies and fiber and vitamins. These are the cherry on top. This is not the foundation, but it can be really helpful. And finally, we have our category of not very helpful strategies. I once was reading a major running publication, and they said to not run as much, to stay healthy. Now, I think that's a bit antithetical to our goals as runners. We don't want to run less, we want to run more. And antithetical to performance, which is, I really don't like this advice. Easy running is not the most injury-prone thing that you can do in your training. It's really about the intensity and how fast you're running, the kinds of workouts that you're doing, the speed at which you're doing those workouts. So if you're worried about running too much and getting hurt, I would first be worried about running too fast and getting hurt. And then, of course, there are a lot of strategies that just aren't really tested. Things like red light therapy. I think it probably is maybe helpful for your skin, but probably is not helpful for helping your muscles recover. I just haven't seen any really convincing science on that aspect of things. And so whenever you see one of these strategies, if it looks a little untested or you haven't seen it used out in the world by pro runners or advanced athletes, maybe at the collegiate level who are training really hard, it's probably a bit unreliable. So I hope that this video gave you a taxonomy, a hierarchy, a ranking of some of the best injury prevention strategies. From getting your training right and really dialing in your diet, your sleep, and your strength training, and then focusing on some of the nice to haves like supplements and doing some self-massage and those kinds of strategies that are great to do once you have already knocked out those fundamentals. If you want to learn more injury prevention strategies from some of the best runners in the world, I collected 9 elite athletes' responses to the question, what's your favorite recovery and injury prevention strategy? It's all at the link under this video, or you can go to strengthrunning.com/elites. Let's train hard, but let's also stay healthy.